The Giants made a very interesting trade today, sending Ross Stripling to the Oakland A's in exchange for outfielder Jonah Cox. And the Giants are also sending cash to the A's. And so more interesting than the trade itself is what it means. Like, it seems to be a precursor to another move, or at least that would be the hope.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Check us out there. And please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And where we get started is, yes, the Giants made another interesting trade. This has not been a boring offseason when you look at the moves in totality. It's been boring in the sense that it's been slow, not just for San Francisco, but for the entire sport. But, you know, another player who vastly kind of underperformed expectations last year is gone, is traded, just like Mitch Haniger, just like Anthony DeSclafani, and now Stripling, and Alex Wood is a free agent. So, like, addition by subtraction in a lot of ways here, it feels. Like, as a fan, I would feel kind of like they've gotten rid of a lot of players who you didn't really want to be on the team. And so the A's just basically it's kind of amazing. The A's take on the most of the $12.5 million that Stripling was owed. $3.25 million the Giants are sending to Oakland. And so what does that leave? Like $8.75 million or $9.25 million. 9.25. Gosh, math is hard on the fly. $9.25 million in savings for the San Francisco Giants. So not only they get a player in return, they get rid of Ross Stripling, and they get an extra $9.25 million. And so, of course, the question is, how are you going to spend that money? And relevantly and interestingly, if you watch, there's this clip of Ken Rosenthal, very legit reporter, who mentioned the Giants as one of the teams that was like kind of, I don't want to say a finalist or whatever, but they were in on Corbin Burnes before he eventually got dealt to Baltimore. And so, yes, some people are going to react to this and say yet another like failed pursuit and second place finish. But the more relevant kind of fact to me, when you've got Ken Rosenthal saying the Giants and the Orioles, is that they are still out here looking to make some moves. And it doesn't seem coincidental to me that they make a move to shed money the day after a trade like that goes down, because no longer can they acquire Corbin Burnes. And so to me, this is the hope, at least, is that, a Blake Snell is still out there. And I say a Blake Snell. Blake Snell, he won the National League Cy Young Award. Hello. And guess who was second? Logan Webb. Blake Snell is still out there. Seattle native. So, nothing against, he doesn't have anything against the West Coast, I assume. Some people do, but I would imagine Snell doesn't. Being relatively closer to friends and family makes it easier for them to travel to your games. That stuff matters. And so the Giants are as good of a fit as any team, especially when they continue subtracting from their rotation. And then especially when you consider the fact that their freeing up money. And according to Roster Resource now, their estimated payroll has dropped down to just $155 million, whereas last year it was 196. So they're like 41 million below where they were last year at this moment in time. And their estimated luxury tax payroll, which is calculated differently and includes like 17 million in estimated player benefits, that the luxury tax payroll is super different. But teams do pay this money. So, from their perspective, it's what they're paying. But the first threshold is 237 million, and that's where you start to get penalized if you reach that number. And they're at 199.9. So they're 37 or 36.9 million. I can't do math. 37.1 million away from that first luxury tax threshold. So basically what I'm seeing is a lot of cash. And what I'm also seeing is that there are 4 top free agents still available in the form of Snell and Jordan Montgomery, 2 left-handed pitchers, and then Matt Chapman, a third baseman, Cody Bellinger, an outfielder slash first baseman. And then there's, of course, a huge list of other kind of mid-tier players and below that are also still available. It's kind of a shocking number of players who are still free agents as we are here in February. And something's got to give. Eventually, those top 4 guys are going to end up somewhere. And I just continue to see the Giants as being as good of a fit as any team. And I particularly think about Snell here when we are talking about the money that they freed up, but also the starting rotation. Because if you look at what does the starting rotation look like on opening day, and it's not just opening day because, you've got Alex Cobb and you've got Robbie Ray set to open in the season on the injured list. However, we're not just talking about like 2 weeks. For Robbie Ray, he said like just recently after the All-Star break is kind of the best case scenario. And so, we're looking at probably like August, maybe early August for Robbie Ray, I would guess, as kind of a reasonable return date, and maybe longer than that. And for Alex Cobb, I still haven't gotten a clear picture on when they expect him back. I've heard good reports, but I would still expect him to miss probably at least, this is kind of a guess on my part, but at least 2 months. And so those games count in the beginning of the season. And what you've got right now is you've got a rotation that features, yes, Logan Webb at the top. Yes, Kyle Harrison, given, definitely there's a clear opportunity and path for him now with so many guys cleared out. Like I said, Wood is gone. Stripling has been traded. DeSclafani has been traded. Then, of course, the addition of Jordan Hicks, but that's kind of an unknown because he's transitioning from the bullpen to the rotation. And then you're looking at like Keaton Wynn and Tristan Beck. And you've got guys in the minors too, Hayden Birdsong, Mason Black, Carson Wisenhunt. So you've got like guys, but they're all unproven, including Jordan Hicks because he's coming from the bullpen. And so I just have a hard time seeing them going into the season like, yep, this is what we're rolling with. If they do, then they really believe in their young players, or they just, there really is some kind of like total spending mandate, and we'll see what ends up happening. I know a lot of people probably think that that's the case, but I always say I'm going to wait until, until those players actually sign somewhere and it's not San Francisco and the season starts and they haven't made it a big trade or something. That's when I'll make that analysis. But today, on February 2nd, that's not the time for that analysis. And to me, it looks like they're setting themselves up to make a significant move, especially a move in the rotation. So, coming up in just a minute, more about what I hope and what I fear. And some of the comments by Farhan Zaidi specifically talking about this trade and why they did it. That's going to be super interesting. So we'll get into it in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, for me, I have used eBay Motors numerous times for style. You can get some really great things, and you get the eBay Guaranteed Fit. eBay Motors just has you covered. With over 122 million parts to choose from, your number one ride or die will always have exactly what it needs and exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, this is what I'm talking about. Your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, as promised, we're going to get more into this fascinating trade. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about the return, but I think this trade is less about the return than it is about what it means to have traded away like one of your only veteran pitchers. I mean, I guess you've got Webb and you've got Ray and Cobb eventually coming back. And so if this season didn't really matter and you were like kind of just using it as a season of transition, then I could see them not adding pitching. But that would be extremely frustrating. Although I do like these young players. It's like I like Keaton Winn. I like Tristan Beck. I definitely like Kyle Harrison. I like Mason Black. I like Carson Wisenhunt. So if that's really what it's about and that comes to fruition, I'll complain about it, but I'll also have some excitement to watch those guys pitch every night and see what happens. But I also think like reducing their pay, if they just didn't spend another dime and they went down $40 million in payroll, it's just kind of unacceptable. And I'll definitely raise a huge fuss about that. But again, I'm not going to do that until it becomes time to do that. And now is not the time to do that. So anyway, Locked On, by the way, has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, so these comments by Farhan Zaidi, so they make me a little bit concerned, but at the same time, I'm not going to lie to you. I just have come to kind of not take what he says seriously necessarily. I'm not saying I don't like the guy. I'm not saying, fire Farhan. I'm not saying that he's not a good person. I think that it's just, as a president of baseball operations, you don't want to show your cards. And so I feel like he's said things and done other things, said one thing and done another. And so I'm going to read you what he had to say and tell you what I have to say about what he had to say. So let's just get into it. He said, quote, about the trade, quote, a lot of it is our continued enthusiasm and excitement about the young pitchers who we've referenced a lot coming up through the upper levels. A lot of them have been at Papago Park, which is a player development complex, since the beginning of January. So they've had a month there. So we have a really good sense of where they are and where they're trending to start the season. We wanted to create more avenues for some of that group to get opportunities in the rotation, especially early in the season. So that was a big driving force behind the move. We expect Strip to bounce back and pitch well in 2024. We know that last year didn't go the way that he expected or planned. It was a combination of circumstances. We think he's going to do really well in Oakland, end quote. And I'll just pause there. He may not believe that. If you think he's going to do really well, you're probably not trading him, right? But, the fact that the A's gave up a player and spent $9 million to get Ross Stripling is a little bit weird, given that they're going to lose like 100 games. So what's the point? But I don't know. They just must really not believe in the player they gave up. That's why it's so interesting and strange from the Giants' perspective. It's not strange. It's strange if it's the only thing that they do. Although it does free up a roster spot and they save money that they could spend. They don't have to spend it on a pitcher. Look, if they really believe in these young guys so much and then they do spend that money on, Chapman and Bellinger or something like that, then look, I wouldn't complain too much. I do think it's it's too unproven of a rotation, but I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. What I just said about not always believing Farhan Zaidi, I also feel the same way in reverse sometimes. Like, I need to take him more literally because sometimes he's like he's saying here, he's basically, I'm just like, no, that's probably not what it means, but maybe it is what it means. So maybe it's just, I have no idea if he's telling the truth or not on any given kind of press meeting. And so I don't know if this is true or not. And so then the author of this article, who is Maria Guardado of sfgiants.com, says, she mentions that the Giants are sending $3.25 million to the A's, leaving them with $9.25 million to potentially allocate to other areas of need on the roster. She mentions Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery among free agent pitchers who remain unsigned with less than 2 weeks to go to spring training. And then she says, but Zaidi reiterated that Friday's trade isn't necessarily a precursor to another rotation addition. And then a quote from Farhan, quote, this move wasn't made with the thought to sort of tandem it with some backfill move in the rotation. I guess I wouldn't rule out something happening there, but there are no plans for that as of now, end quote. And so I guess I'm a little confused because when he says backfill the rotation, I wasn't there for the press conference or the Zoom or whatever. I'm supposed to be invited, but I didn't see that. And I was out anyway, but backfilling the rotation, like is it's like, oh well, are you gonna go out and get another Ross Stripling type? My answer, if I was Zaidi, would be like, we're not planning on it. But front filling the rotation, that's a different story. So I don't like backfill. I'm gonna look up the definition of backfill just to make sure I know this right. Like, it's filling out. Yeah, I guess you could. It's funny that I'm doing this live on the show. To refill something such as an excavation, usually with excavated material. So to refill, so to kind of backfill, I guess maybe that is exactly what he means. Is like we did not make this move with the thought of or tandeming it with kind of replacing Stripling with somebody else. And so that's just the thing. And I can just hear people in my head, like some people are always like, he's lying at everything he says. And then if you think he's lying, then is he lying about this? Because then if he's lying about this, then you believe they are going to do something. So I just don't know what to believe. And also, like, keep in mind, if you're in negotiations to kind of try to acquire a Blake Snell, you don't want to just back yourself into a corner and be like, yes, this move was a precursor to go get Blake Snell. Like, you're just not going to say that. And so we can read these all we want, but at the end of the day, it's the actions that matter, and we'll find out eventually. And also, like Guardado points out, it doesn't have to be in the rotation, right? They really could just be super high on a lot of these young pitchers, and that is the strength of their farm system. And I am very intrigued. Like, I'm super excited to see another year out of Kyle Harrison, and we saw a lot of good things out of Keaton Winn and Tristan Beck. Jordan Hicks is a big wild card, but has upside for sure. And then there's a lot of young pitchers behind these guys coming. And so if they were to just say, look, we kind of believe in our young pitching and we're going to go out there, I mentioned yesterday, it was all about Willy Adames. Like, say you go out and trade for Willy Adames and you also sign a Cody Bellinger or something. I would prefer, go get a Blake Snell and a Willy Adames and make that happen. But I just don't know. The point is that they made this move. I think it's rather curious. I don't really fully trust these comments. I think that going into the season, he said, especially early in the season, like, you're going to lose some game. I mean, unless, like he said, they're at Papago, right? And so what that means is that they're, these days teams have like sophisticated kind of pitch analysis systems in place where they can basically, the pitchers are throwing and they have like a machine, like a TrackMan machine, watching them and kind of looking at the characteristics of their pitches, and you could basically tell how good of a pitch a guy has thrown just by looking at the numbers that the pitch produces. And so sometimes, like, for example, guys, remember Hunter Strickland? He threw really, really hard, but it wasn't a good pitch, and it got hit hard. Some guys throw, like Yusmeiro Petit, throw in the upper 80s and are more effective than a guy who throws 100. Why is that? And it has to do with certain characteristics, extension and spin rates and stuff like that. And so that's what they're kind of looking at. And so when he mentions they've been at Papago, I think he means like we have the data on these guys and we think they're better options than Stripling, and or we think they're like good major league options. And so anyway, regardless, I just think they have to spend that money. Like, they can't just be done. I guess, if you make some trades, it's not really about what is the payroll, although it is definitely worth pointing out. They're down $40 million right now from where they were last season. So coming up in just a minute, we'll just wrap up. What do I think that they need to do? Because they need to do more. Like, I had to block a poor soul on Twitter. And if you're listening, I apologize. I don't like to block people, but this argument was going nowhere and there was like insults being thrown around. Basically, we'll get into what it was about. Why did Ben block somebody on Twitter? We'll get into it in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. So, guess what we're going to talk about? Football. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And of course, a lot of you listening are celebrating more than 99% of the fans out there because you are probably a 49ers fan and they are in the Super Bowl. If you're like me, usually a normal Super Bowl when the Niners are not in it, it's all about best seat on the couch, watching the commercials, eating some good food and placing some super bets. With the Niners in it, it's all ratcheted up to a 10 for me. And FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a W or 2 or 3. Like, you can bet on the game itself, just who's going to win the game, the money line. And by the way, the 49ers, I keep checking on this every day. And let's see, Super Bowl, whatever, Roman numerals. Niners are favorites at -130 and the point spread at -2.5, over under 47.5. And so if you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and place a bet of $5 or more, sign new customers, and win, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. So again, FanDuel.com/lockedon. Join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5+ wins. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, here we go. We're going to talk about why did I should probably unblock the guy. He said, I think one of his first things he said was that he enjoyed my show, but then it turned into this, in my opinion, ridiculous conversation about Rhys Hoskins. I don't know, for whatever reason, a bunch of people seemed really mad that the Giants didn't sign Rhys Hoskins. I just don't understand the point there. They first base is far from their biggest need. If you look at the production they got out of first base last year, it was quite good. with Wade doing so well against right-handed pitching, Flores just having a monster season in general, and he played a lot of first base. Anyway, thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, next week, we're back to 5 days a week. So prepare for a lot of Locked On Giants, hopefully some more action. I think maybe, who knows, over the weekend, maybe they do backfill the rotation and we go back and say, well, why did you say you weren't thinking of it? And they won't have a good answer for it. But that's just where I'm at with not just Farhan Zaidi, it's kind of generally baseball executives are so deceitful, like they're just so secretive. They're so secretive, and you just can't really trust anything they say. And it's unfortunate, but the proof is in the pudding. It's like, what do you actually do? And then you analyze it. But quotes, unless they're just like clearly being super honest, they're either true or they're not true, and that's not very helpful. But anyway, we'll be doing mailbags and hopefully talking about activity as spring training. Pitchers and catchers report in like less than 2 weeks, believe it or not. And so we're getting close here, guys, and everyone, to the start of the 2024 season. But the Giants, their roster is not complete. And part of what I was arguing with this person on Twitter about was Rhys Hoskins. And why? Good question. The point that was being made was that I was making excuses because I made an episode. Basically, I think I maybe didn't express it super well, but the point was about the fact that Rhys Hoskins got a 2-year deal with an opt-out. And it was a point of, anger for fans many times last offseason was not just last offseason, it was accumulation of years of these 2-year deals with opt-outs that people really hated and considered loses. And that's what Hoskins rightfully got. It kind of made the most sense for him. But that wasn't I wasn't trying to say that was the only reason the Giants didn't or shouldn't have signed Rhys Hoskins. I have been asked on this show numerous times about Rhys Hoskins' free agency, and my answer every time, I'm sure, has been, I really like him as a hitter. I know that he's local, and so there's a chance that you could actually sign the guy. But first of all, first base isn't a huge need. I think there are other areas that are more of a need. And secondly, defense, which again, it's a double-edged sword. You want to talk about a lose-lose. You sign a guy, and then you're going to have a big segment of people complaining, yeah, but he stinks defensively. And he's also coming off, an entire missed season. So it's like Michael Conforto 2.0. Look, I like Rhys Hoskins as a player. I wouldn't be upset if the Giants had signed him. But the conversation, and it kind of would tipped me over the edge because I got a lot of people giving this response. I may have come across a little bit. The message I wanted to get across didn't maybe come across great in the episode. But we're acting like it seemed like we were acting like Rhys Hoskins was like the guy, like the only guy left, either the only guy left or like the best player left, which he was neither of those things. And he's probably going to have a pretty good year, and he'll probably opt out. And if you really wanted to sign him, you could sign him next offseason. So I don't know. So anyway, the point is, the Giants have things to do, but I wouldn't, not signing Rhys Hoskins didn't end their offseason. It wasn't like that was their last hope. If he was, they probably should have signed him because they have work to do. I want to be clear about that too. And that's where I ended up having to block this person because they were now make an excuse for the Giants not getting Corbin Burnes, even though the price wasn't that high. When you start coming at me like that, you might get blocked. I'm sorry to say, but because I don't have time for people being rude to me on Twitter. Anyway, I'm not making excuses. I'm simply saying the offseason isn't over. And I just said, and I'll say it again and again, if they don't do anything else, I will call this out as an offseason in which they made some interesting moves, but they didn't do enough. I will definitely 100% say that. coming off the 2 disappointing seasons in a row that they've had. Jung-Hoo Lee, I'm excited about. Jordan Hicks, I really am intrigued by the upside. I like Tom Murphy as a backup catcher. It means something's going to happen with Joey Bart. We don't know what. And they signed somebody else, and I'm blanking on who it was. I think they did. The Robbie Ray trade. That was the other kind of significant move. And now they've traded Ross Stripling. They got rid of Haniger and DeSclafani. So it's been an interesting offseason for the Giants, to be sure, but it's not over yet. Like, this offseason has just been really slow. It's not just San Francisco. It is the entire sport. And you've got 4 Scott Boras clients who are the top remaining players available: Snell, Montgomery, Bellinger, Chapman. And the Giants make as much sense as any team in the sport to land at least one of those guys. And I'm not ruling out 2. And when you start clearing money like they have with like trading away Ross Stripling, it just starts to, logically your brain just goes to, okay, what are they doing this for? You've just given up a guy who was kind of more established and giving yourself more uncertainty. Are you going to do something with those, with that open roster spot and with that extra money when you already had plenty of money to spend? So we'll find out. Let's just not jump to conclusions. That's all I ask. And hopefully by Monday, when we have our next episode, we'll gain some clarity. Maybe something happens over the weekend. So thanks again for listening. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out so much. So thank you in advance, and thank you to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again on Monday. And by the way, if anything major does happen over the weekend, I'm going to do an emergency podcast. You better believe it. And so if anything significant happens, be on the lookout for that. I'll be trying to do it as soon as possible. So thanks again for listening today, talking Ross Stripling, this strange trade. And anyway, you are now Locked on Giants.